Tiffany was a middle-aged woman who had already experienced the burdens of life. At 42 years old, working as a bus dispatcher in a bus fleet, she felt as if she were lost in the midst of a gray routine. With her husband Vance, who was already unemployed, life was not fun either. His frequent beer consumption and constant TV watching only made the atmosphere in the house worse. Instead of support, Tiffany was met with indifference and detachment from him. However, it was not her job or Vance that worried her the most, but her daughter Olivia. Tiffany had Olivia from her marriage to her previous husband, taxi driver Roger, but she had changed a lot lately. Tiffany noticed that the girl was coming home late, and she noticed that she was buying expensive things that she didn't have the money to buy. Her mother began to suspect that Olivia had gotten involved with the wrong crowd. These thoughts haunted Tiffany even in her sleep, not allowing her to sleep peacefully. That night, when the clock struck 2 o'clock, Olivia still hadn't returned home. Devastated by her mother's fear, Tiffany tried to call her daughter, but the caller was unavailable. Eventually, however, Olivia returned, and the smell of alcohol in the air indicated that she had been drinking heavily. Tiffany began to plead with Vance to help, but he was sound asleep, showing no signs of disturbance. She had to support her daughter herself when she could barely stand up. For the first time in her life, Olivia was so drunk that she could barely walk to her room. But Tiffany decided not to tolerate this. Her daughter would not go down the path of drunkenness. She would not allow it. The next morning, trying to understand the situation, Tiffany asked Olivia to explain her behavior. Although she tried to assure her that everything was under control and that it was just an innocent birthday party for her friend Karina, she could not explain where the money and expensive items came from. These explanations did not reassure Tiffany, and she decided to investigate the contents of her daughter's bag. What she found shocked her. The bag contained money that Olivia could not explain properly. The mother suspected that her daughter was hiding something, and this worried her even more. Tiffany could not accept that Olivia had fallen under the influence of a dubious company. Her worries reached their peak when Olivia didn't come home for the night one night. Tiffany found a note telling her daughter that she was not coming back. Filled with despair, she began searching Olivia's room, trying to find at least some clue. But an unexpected discovery, condoms, was the last straw. Tiffany realized that Olivia was sexually active, and this pushed her to take decisive action. She decided to reach out to her ex-husband, Roger, to share her suspicions and get help. Hoping that together they could protect her daughter from harm, Tiffany began to take action. Meanwhile, Roger, having learned about the situation, also decided to help. He found Karina, Olivia's new friend, who was suspected of having a bad influence on the girl. It turned out that Karina worked at a restaurant, and Tiffany went there to learn more about her daughter's environment. She managed to convince Karina to tell her about Olivia's relationship with the place. Tiffany slowly put the pieces of the puzzle together about Olivia's secret life, trying to understand how her daughter ended up in this situation. But another surprise was that Olivia was pregnant. Tiffany did not know who the father was, but in a conversation with her daughter, she heard a terrible confession. Olivia had been hurt by Tiffany's lover. Tiffany felt devastated. She realized that she had brought this man into her home and allowed him to destroy her daughter's life. Now she had to fight for justice and protect Olivia, even if it meant destroying her own life. After the horrific confession she heard from Olivia, Tiffany couldn't breathe easy. Her world turned upside down when she learned that her own daughter had been hurt by Vance, the man she was trying to build a family life with. The memories of the day she brought him home now seemed like horrible mistakes. How could she have allowed such a man to come near her and her child? Looking at her daughter, sitting in front of her, hunched over and depressed, Tiffany felt deeply guilty. She realized that she was to blame for everything that had happened. It was her inability to see the true nature of Vance that had led to Olivia falling victim to his malicious actions. Tiffany could not bear the thought that her daughter was now carrying a child under her heart from a man she once loved and trusted. After recovering from her shock, Tiffany immediately decided to act. She knew that she could not remain silent about what had happened. She contacted Roger, her ex-husband and Olivia's father, and told him everything. Roger was furious. He could not believe that their daughter had been the victim of such an atrocity. He felt resentment not only toward Vance, but also toward himself for failing to protect his child. Tiffany decided to file a police report. She knew it would be a difficult step, but she couldn't let it go. Vance had to be held accountable for what he had done. She and Roger went to the police station and told them what had happened. Olivia, although upset, realized that this was the only right thing to do. She signed a statement confirming her desire to punish the offender. Tiffany felt her world begin to shake beneath her feet. How many more trials would she have to endure to protect Olivia? How would they live with everything that had happened? All of these questions crushed her heart, but she had no right to give up. She had to be strong for her daughter. The same day, Vance was detained. He didn't believe he could be charged, and he acted brazenly, showing no signs of guilt. But the police were determined to carry out all necessary investigative actions. Tiffany watched as her husband was taken out of the house in handcuffs and for a moment felt relieved. However, this was only the beginning of a long and painful journey to healing. At home, Tiffany tried to talk to Olivia, to support her and reassure her, but her daughter was deeply depressed. She couldn't understand how it all happened, why she was a victim of such a terrible situation. Tiffany tried her best to explain to her daughter that what had happened was not her fault, but words were of little help at a time like this. Eventually, they both realized that they had to make another important decision. Tiffany went to the doctor to see if she could have an abortion. It was not an easy choice, but the mother realized that her daughter was not ready for motherhood, especially in such a difficult situation. The doctor recommended an abortion, assuring her that it would not harm Olivia's health. They agreed to have the operation the next day, but fate threw another surprise. Olivia disappeared from the hospital without undergoing the procedure. Tiffany rushed to find her, first going to Karina, who might know where her daughter was. Karina was surprised to hear that Olivia had been with her, but had left without explaining where she was going. Tiffany realized that Olivia could have gone to see Edward, a musician from the restaurant for whom she had feelings. Edward had become an object of idealization for her, and now she wanted to be with him at all costs, even though he had rejected her. Tiffany gathered all her strength and went to the restaurant where Edward worked. She realized that it was there that she could find Olivia, because her daughter clearly could not accept the fact that her feelings for Edward were not reciprocated. The very thought that Olivia could be with a man who had disregarded her love pushed Tiffany to take decisive action. When she got to the restaurant, it immediately became clear to her that not everything was as clean as it seemed. The atmosphere around the place where Edward worked was one of cheap appeal, mixed with dubious customers. But Tiffany didn't pay attention to it. She knew Olivia was here, and she had to find her by all means. She entered the restaurant and immediately spotted Edward. He was standing near the stage where the music was playing, and he didn't look like the prince Olivia had imagined. Tiffany came closer, but her gaze was met with indifference. Edward didn't even try to greet her. He just looked at her sideways as if nothing had happened. This angered Tiffany even more. She walked up to him and asked him without ceremony where her daughter was. Edward, trying to avoid the conversation, coldly replied that he did not know where Olivia was and that he was not interested at all. This indifference only confirmed all of Tiffany's suspicions about the man. He was far from the man her daughter was looking for. Suddenly, from behind the scenes, she saw Olivia. Her daughter was standing in the corner, hiding from the stage, watching what was happening. Her eyes showed fear, uncertainty, and hope at the same time. Tiffany realized that Olivia was hoping for some kind of miracle that would bring Edward back to her. But the truth was too cruel. Edward had long since given up on her. Tiffany approached Olivia, not holding back her feelings. She grabbed her daughter by the shoulders and said quietly but firmly, "Olivia, we are going home, right now." The girl flinched at her words, but did not object. She was too tired from all these events, from the way her world had been turned upside down. Olivia looked down, as if trying to avoid her mother's presence, but Tiffany did not let go of her. She gently but firmly pulled her daughter to her, and they left the restaurant together. On the way home, Olivia was silent. She seemed to be trying to think about what had happened, but her soul was filled with confusion and pain. Her dreams of the future, of love with Edward, were shattered like fragile glass. She finally realized that the man she loved so much was never really who she thought he was. Tiffany was also silent, giving her daughter time to think. She realized that Olivia was in a difficult place right now, not only physically, but emotionally as well. She needed time to recover from everything that had happened and to figure out how to live with this truth. However, a few days later, a new problem knocked on their door. The doctor Tiffany had consulted for an abortion informed her that delaying the surgery could be dangerous for Olivia's health. She had to make a decision immediately. Tiffany talked to her daughter again. She explained all the consequences and possible risks. Although it was a painful conversation, Olivia finally agreed to have the pregnancy terminated. She realized that she was not ready to become a mother, especially in such difficult circumstances. The day of the surgery came quickly. Tiffany accompanied Olivia to the hospital, but when the moment came, something in her daughter changed. She suddenly realized that this choice could also have consequences. Olivia got out of bed and decided to run away again. She was afraid not of the surgery itself, but of the fact that this choice would deprive her of something important forever. Tiffany felt her heart sink with despair when she was told that Olivia had run away from the hospital for the second time. This time, she had no idea where her daughter had gone, but she knew one thing. Olivia was lost between fears and feelings that kept her from making a final decision. Tiffany could not leave it to chance. She decided that she would not stop until she found her daughter and helped her through this difficult stage. Tiffany hurried home, looking for any clue as to where her daughter might be. Her heart was beating at a frantic pace. Her thoughts were confused. She thought that Olivia might have gone back to Karina or perhaps reached out to Edward again, despite their last meeting. But this time, Tiffany knew that Olivia wouldn't run away forever. She just needed to give her daughter space and time to process what was happening. However, letting go of the situation was not easy. When Tiffany got home, she got on the computer and started looking through Olivia's social media, trying to find some clues. She noticed old messages with Edward, in which her daughter wrote about her love of music and her plans for the future. Maybe she went to look for him again, Tiffany thought, feeling a mixture of fear and hope. She realized that her daughter was still in love with this man, and he could have been her only goal after escaping from the hospital. Tiffany decided to contact Karina again. They agreed to meet at the same restaurant where Karina worked and where Olivia used to come to sing. After a short conversation, Karina admitted that Olivia had indeed come to see her, but quickly disappeared, saying she had something else to decide. Karina didn't know the details, but she speculated that Olivia might have tried to see Edward to talk to him again and find out the truth about their future. Tiffany felt she couldn't wait any longer. She went to the house where Edward lived, hoping to find Olivia there. The road seemed endless, and every minute dragged on like an eternity. Tiffany couldn't hold back her tears. It all seemed like too much for one woman who only wanted to protect her daughter from pain and mistakes. When Tiffany arrived at Edward's house, she was almost ready to knock on the door when she saw Olivia sitting on a bench nearby. The girl was sitting with her knees pressed to her chest, looking so lonely and vulnerable that Tiffany's heart broke. She carefully approached her daughter and sat down next to her. "Olivia, you don't have to do this," Tiffany said quietly, hoping that her words would reach her daughter. "You don't have to look for him again. He's not the one who can help you." Olivia looked up, and Tiffany saw tears in her eyes. "I thought he loved me, Mom," Olivia whispered. "I thought we could be together, that things would be different. And now I just don't know what to do. He said he couldn't be a father, that it was impossible, and I believed him. But I never wanted any of this." Tiffany hugged her daughter. She didn't know what to say at this moment. Olivia's pain was obvious, and words could not change what had already happened. They sat on the bench, embracing, and for the first time in days, Tiffany felt that she had her daughter back, at least partially. But this journey was far from over. "We'll make it," Tiffany finally said, choosing her words carefully. "We'll find a way, even if it doesn't seem like there is one right now. You're not alone, Olivia. I'm here. I am with you." The daughter, sobbing, just nodded. She felt that she needed the support, and although her future still looked foggy, she knew that her mother would always be there for her. This gave her at least some hope that everything could be fixed. The next few days passed in a strange state of calm. Olivia didn't talk about Edward anymore, and even avoided mentioning him. Tiffany did not insist. She realized that her daughter had to cope with her disappointment on her own. But the question of pregnancy was still in the air, and Tiffany knew that it could not be postponed. A few days later, when the tension had subsided a bit, Olivia, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of hot tea, suddenly decided to talk about something that had long tormented her soul. "Mom, why do you think all this happened to me?" she asked quietly, looking up at the window where the first snowflakes were already starting to fall. "I never wanted anything bad. I just wanted to live, to sing, to be happy. But all of this, it all came crashing down on me so suddenly, I didn't even realize how confused I was." Tiffany took a deep breath. It was a difficult moment, one that required great wisdom and patience. "You know, Olivia, sometimes life throws us trials that seem completely unfair," she began, trying to find the right words. "We can plan, dream, but we don't always have control over what happens. What happened to you, it was not your fault. It happened because of people we may have underestimated, because of our hopes for them, because of our feelings. But this does not mean that everything is lost now. You have a chance to fix your life, to start over, and I will be here to help you." Olivia looked at her mother, her eyes shining with tears. "But I don't know if I can, Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "After everything that's happened, I just don't know how to go on." Tiffany moved closer and hugged her daughter. "You can do this, Olivia. I know you can. You're strong, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. And you have talent. You sang with such passion, like no one else. I'm sure this is just the beginning of your journey. Music has always been your dream, and you shouldn't give it up just because life has thrown you a curveball. It will take time, but you will find your way again." Olivia remained silent, clinging to her mother, but Tiffany felt hope begin to emerge in her daughter. It was a long road to recovery, but the first step had been taken. A few weeks later, as Olivia began to gradually return to her normal life, she started talking about music again. At first, it was just small comments about her favorite songs or tunes she liked. But over time, these conversations grew into something more. One day, she confessed to her mother, "Mom, I want to sing again, but this time, not in a restaurant, not in a club. I want to learn. I want to develop. I want to become a real singer." It was like music to Tiffany's ears. She realized that her daughter was finally starting to look forward, rather than looking back at past mistakes. Although the road to realizing this dream was still long, Tiffany was ready to support Olivia every step of the way. They began discussing possible plans for the future. Olivia was seriously thinking about going to music school or finding a teacher who could help her develop her voice and skills. Tiffany felt that this would be an important part of their new life. However, there was still one unresolved issue on the horizon. Vance, after being arrested and released on bail, hadn't been in touch. Tiffany tried to keep this a secret from Olivia, not wanting to upset her with unnecessary details. But she knew that sooner or later she would have to decide again what to do with this man. One night, as Olivia was going to bed, Tiffany heard the doorbell ring. A feeling of anxiety enveloped her as she went to the door and opened it. Vance was standing on the doorstep. He looked completely different than before. His face was exhausted, and his eyes had lost the indifference they had always had. Vance stood there, shifting hesitantly from one foot to the other, as if he couldn't decide whether he should have come here at all. "Tiffany, he began but found no words. Tiffany looked at him silently. She had no desire to see this man in her life again, but she knew that a conversation with him was inevitable. "What do you want?" she asked, not raising her voice but with a cold tone. Vance lowered his head. "I wanted to apologize for everything. I know I don't deserve to be forgiven, but I had to say it. Tiffany couldn't believe that he was standing in front of her and trying to talk about apologizing. Something had changed in him, but was it enough to make a difference? "It won't change what happened," she said sharply, "and you know it." Vance nodded. "I know that, but I'm not that guy anymore. I stopped drinking. I got a job. I'm trying to change." Tiffany was silent. She understood that this was his way of trying to fix his life. But what he did to her daughter was irreversible. "Olivia will never forgive you," she said, "and neither will I." Vance lowered his head even lower. "I'm not looking for forgiveness, Tiffany. I just wanted you to know. I won't bother you anymore." With that, he turned and walked away. Tiffany closed the door and felt her tension begin to ease. She knew that their life would not be perfect for a long time to come, but now she had only one goal: to help Olivia get back on her feet and keep moving forward. This difficult path continued, but now they were together, and it gave them the strength to face any difficulties. After Vance left, Tiffany was left standing on the doorstep, feeling a mixture of relief and inner emptiness. His words echoed in her head, but they had no power anymore. Too much had been said and done to be forgotten. She knew that forgiveness was impossible, no matter how hard he tried to change. Life had moved on, and it was between her and Olivia, unaware of what had happened. Olivia spent that evening in her room, listening to music and flipping through notes from school. Her decision to return to music was beginning to materialize. She started looking for a teacher to help her develop her vocal skills. Her mother was happy to see her daughter finding her place in this world again after so many trials and tribulations. One morning, when Olivia was sitting in her room at her laptop, looking at the pages of music schools, she turned to her mother. "Mom, I found a program where you can learn vocals and perform at various events. Maybe I could try to get in." Tiffany stopped when she heard these words. Her gaze gently scanned Olivia's face, which was more hopeful than it had been in months. She felt proud that her daughter was dreaming again. "I think it's a great idea," she replied with a smile. "You need to move forward, and I will support you in that. If you are sure that this is what you want, then we will find a way to make it happen." Olivia suddenly stood up and hugged her mother, feeling that she had the right to dream again, and, most importantly, that she had a person who would always support her. The weeks after that stretched into a new, calmer rhythm. Olivia devoted more and more time to preparing for admission to the music program, taking up vocal training, recording new videos of her performances, and communicating with teachers online. Tiffany saw her daughter gradually come back to life, becoming more confident and calm. This was what she had always wanted for Olivia, to see her happy. Despite the heavy memories that still loomed over them, they tried not to look back. Vance never showed up again, and it seemed like this dark chapter in their lives was finally closed. Tiffany was reluctant to share the news from the past, but she also didn't let it get in the way of their path forward together. One morning, as they were having breakfast together, Olivia seemed a little nervous. "Mom," she said, looking up at Tiffany, "I wanted to talk to you about Spencer." Tiffany carefully placed her cup on the table and looked at her daughter. "What's wrong with him?" Olivia sighed, searching for the right words. "Do you remember when you told him I was pregnant with his child?" She was silent for a moment and then continued, "I understand why you did it. You wanted to find a responsible man who could be there for you. But I don't want him to think that I had any feelings for him, or that I expect him to support me. We were friends, and I don't want to get tangled up in that relationship again." Tiffany nodded, thinking about what she had just said. "Olivia, I didn't mean to hurt you or force you to do anything you didn't want to do. Spencer really tried to be there for you when he found out. But if you don't want to continue that, I understand." Olivia smiled a little sadly. "I think I just want to move on without looking back at the past. Spencer was a good friend, but I don't want him to think I'm attached to him because of all this. I need to find myself, my life." Tiffany took her hand. "It's your decision, Olivia. You have the right to build your future as you see fit, and I will support you in this, as I always have." Since then, Olivia has not returned to the topic of Spencer. She decided that she wanted to focus on herself, on her future, on the music that had begun to bring her joy again. A few months later, when Olivia finally received an invitation to join a music program, she felt her life was making sense again. Tiffany saw her daughter come alive before her eyes. She was preparing for the trip, making her plans, talking about future performances and dreams. Olivia's departure was both sad and happy for Tiffany. She knew that this step was necessary for her daughter's future, but at the same time she felt the emptiness that Olivia was leaving behind. However, now it was a feeling of peace for the first time in a long time. They could both live without looking back at past mistakes. As Olivia boarded the train, preparing for a new chapter in her life, Tiffany stood on the platform waving. Her eyes glistened with tears, but they were tears of joy and pride. Her daughter had finally found her way, and that way led to a new life filled with hope, dreams, and new opportunities. Tiffany slowly returned home, feeling peaceful in her heart. She knew that there would be many more challenges and difficulties ahead, but now she could face them with her head held high. They had overcome the hardest part, and now time was on their side. Tiffany returned home after Olivia's departure, feeling a mixture of joy for her daughter and loneliness that she could not hide. The house seemed empty and quiet. Even the familiar smell of coffee barely boiling on the stove did not bring the same comfort. For the first time in a long time, Tiffany felt that her life now belonged to her alone. Olivia had started her journey, and she was left alone with her thoughts and decisions. Days passed that now seemed endlessly long. Tiffany often recalled past events, how they had affected their lives and how much they had changed her. She used to be sure that her main goal was to protect and care for her daughter. Now that Olivia has gone her own way, Tiffany had to learn to live again, but for herself. She started working again to occupy her time and dispel her thoughts. The bus fleet where she worked as a dispatcher hadn't changed. The same faces, the same colleagues, the same problems. But everything inside her had changed. The things she used to do seemed meaningless and boring. After everything she had been through, the world no longer seemed the same. She needed a change. One day, on her way home from a shift, Tiffany stopped at an old coffee shop. It was a place she and Olivia used to go to discuss important decisions. Feeling a flash of nostalgia, Tiffany went inside and sat down at a table by the window. Ordering a coffee, she allowed herself to get lost in thought. Her thoughts were interrupted by quiet footsteps. Looking up, Tiffany saw a middle-aged man approaching her with a friendly smile. He stopped at her desk and asked her hesitantly, "Do you mind if I sit down? It's so cozy here, and all the other seats are taken." Tiffany, although surprised, did not object. She had never minded company, especially now that she felt that life required her to open up to new opportunities. The stranger sat down and ordered tea. "Do you come here often?" he asked, trying to strike up a conversation. Tiffany smiled. "I used to. My daughter and I used to love coming here. But I don't come here much anymore. My daughter left for school, and I'm just trying to adjust to the changes." The man listened attentively, not interrupting. He could hear the slight sadness in her voice and realized that this was not just a conversation about everyday life. "Changes are never easy," he said after a pause, "but they give us a chance to find something new in ourselves. My name is Stan, by the way. I am also trying to get used to the new circumstances." Tiffany looked at him with interest. "It's nice to meet you, Stan. I'm Tiffany." From that moment on, their conversation picked up an easy pace. They talked about life, about losses and achievements, about how important it is to find yourself after changes. Tiffany began to feel that these words shared by Stan seemed to help her see new possibilities. Over time, they began to meet more often at the same coffee shop. Their conversations made Tiffany feel that she was not alone in her experiences, and that there were people who were also searching for their own path. Stan was an attentive conversationalist, but he did not try to put pressure. He talked about his life, the loss of his wife a few years ago, and how difficult it was for him to find new meaning in life after that loss. These meetings slowly turned into something more than just a casual acquaintance. Tiffany began to feel that they were getting closer with each conversation. Stan wasn't trying to replace anyone in her life, but his presence brought a new sense of peace. One evening, when they were walking back from a coffee shop together, Stan asked quietly, "Tiffany, have you thought about going away for a while? Maybe a change of scenery? I know you have a lot on your mind right now, but sometimes fresh air in a new place can help you see things differently." Tiffany stopped and looked at him. "It hadn't occurred to me to leave, but maybe you're right. I feel like change is needed, but I didn't know where to start. If you want, we can go together. It doesn't have to be far away. Maybe for a weekend to a cozy place. I just think it would help you get away for a while and find a new balance." Tiffany felt something click inside her. Her heart, which had been so focused on caring for Olivia and overcoming past difficulties, began to open up to new possibilities. "I'll think about it, Stan. Maybe this is exactly what I need." As the days went by, Tiffany began to consider the idea of traveling more and more seriously. She realized that this stage of her life was a kind of transition for her, from caring about others to finding her own meaning. Although the past had left deep scars, she now felt that she had a right to her own happiness. A week later, after packing a few things into a small suitcase, Tiffany called Olivia. Her daughter was in a good mood. She was preparing for her first performance at a concert at the music school. "Mom, I'm so happy that everything worked out," Olivia said enthusiastically on the phone. "You have no idea how many emotions I have right now. You have to come to my concert." Tiffany smiled. "I will, I promise," she replied, feeling proud of her daughter. "But before I do, I'm going to leave town for a few days. I need to clear my head." Olivia was not surprised. She knew it would be good for her mother. "That's a great idea, Mom. You deserve a vacation. Enjoy it, and tell me all about it when you get back." Tiffany hung up the phone, feeling warm and happy. She knew that a new stage of life was ahead of her, and although the road was not easy, she was ready to accept whatever came her way. Tiffany packed her suitcase and went to meet Stan. They agreed to go to a small, cozy town nearby, where there were quiet streets, old buildings, and nature that gave her a sense of peace. The trip seemed both exciting and a little scary to her, because she had never before allowed herself to make such a decision, to go somewhere just to relax and forget about her daily worries. Stan met her at the entrance with a warm gaze and a light smile. He always looked calm and confident in his actions, but at the same time, he didn't put pressure on Tiffany. That was what she liked about him, his ability to be there for her without asking for anything in return. The drive to their destination was easy and filled with casual conversation. They laughed, recalling funny moments from the past, telling stories that made them forget about all the difficulties. Tiffany felt that she was gradually starting to enjoy life again, not only for Olivia's sake, but also for her own. When they arrived in the small town, she was greeted by an atmosphere of real comfort. Narrow streets where the cobblestones rang underfoot, small coffee shops lining the central square, and a quiet park with trees rustling in the wind. They checked into a small hotel with wooden furniture and a view of the river that flowed barely noticeably between the green banks. Stan suggested a walk to the park, and they set off together along the waterfront. Tiffany breathed in the fresh air, feeling all her problems recede into the background. Nothing else seemed to matter except this moment. "I haven't felt this calm in so long," she said, looking out at the water. "It's like all my life I've been thinking about how to survive, how to protect Olivia, how to cope with problems. And now I realize that there's more to life than worrying." Stan nodded, and his eyes lightened slightly with understanding. "I think we all go through moments like this. Life forces us to act on inertia, to solve problems that are sometimes more than we can imagine. But it is important not to forget about ourselves, because if we lose ourselves in this chaos, what will be left?" Tiffany thought about his words. This was something she had realized recently. After all the events, after all the pain and struggle, it was time to regain what had been lost. And it was not only peace, but also her own dreams, her desires, her life. As they walked around the campus, Stan took her hand, and Tiffany didn't protest. She felt warm and calm from this simple gesture. She knew that there was no rush, no compulsion between them. It was natural and right the support they were both looking for, and the feeling that life was not limited to the past. They were sitting on a park bench when suddenly Stan looked at her with a kind of quiet determination. "Tiffany," he began, "I don't know what our future will look like, but I do know one thing. I feel good being with you. I want you to know that I am here. No demands, no expectations. Just here." These words touched her to the core. She looked into his eyes and saw sincerity in them. After all the trials she had been through, Tiffany was afraid to open up to someone again, to trust him again. But Stan didn't ask for anything. He was just there. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That's more than I could have asked for." When Tiffany returned home after the weekend, she felt that something had changed inside her. This short trip not only helped her relax, but also made her realize that she was entitled to a new beginning. She began to see her life not only through the prism of problems and losses, but also through the opportunities that were opening up to her again. Stan stayed close, but without pressure. He would appear when she was ready to talk and fade into the shadows when she needed time to herself. This was what she appreciated most, his understanding and patience. Meanwhile, Olivia continued her music career. Her first performances were a great success, and she often called her mother to share her achievements, plans, and dreams. Tiffany could feel her daughter growing and developing, and it brought her incredible joy. Olivia was no longer that confused girl who didn't know what to do with her life. Now she had a purpose, she had her music, and most importantly, she was happy again. One day, Olivia invited Tiffany to come to her big concert in Kiev. It was the first important event where her daughter performed as a soloist. Tiffany could not miss this event. When Tiffany arrived in the capital, she saw her daughter on stage, illuminated by the spotlight. She was singing with such passion and power that it moved her to the core. Tiffany could not hold back her tears, not from sadness, but from pride. Olivia had achieved her dream. She stood on the stage, confident, and her voice resounded in the hall, mesmerizing everyone present. After the concert, they hugged each other, and Tiffany felt that their journey together had finally led to what they had been striving for all these years, the happiness they had been searching for. "Mom, I'm so glad you came," Olivia said as she hugged her after the performance. "I couldn't have done it without you." Tiffany smiled through her tears. "You did it, Olivia. You always had that talent and strength inside you. I was just there for you." Now that their lives were finally calm and filled with new opportunities, Tiffany knew that the future would bring many more wonderful moments. She had found herself, her strength, and her place in this world. And together with Olivia and the new hope that was now emerging, they were ready for whatever lay ahead.